When the Krenim detected humanity's first successful gravity manipulation test, an entire Krenim armada turned their warships towards Earth and attacked in a panicked frenzy. The brilliant human physicist Charles Hill stood before Earth's trembling leaders in the secret underground command bunker. He gripped the edge of the table, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and steely determination. Our long-range sensors picked up the Krenim armada 36 hours ago. Hundreds of their most advanced warships, armed to the teeth with weaponized gravity drives. We always knew they were decades ahead of us in manipulating gravity fields for propulsion, power generation, even as weapons. But we never thought they'd see us as enough of a threat to throw their full military might at Earth. Charles looked around at the ashen faces of the generals and admirals. They all knew what this attack meant. The end of humanity's fledgling expansion to the stars, perhaps even the end of human civilization itself. Admiral Valdez cleared his throat. Dr. Hill, you're the leader in the field of gravimetrics. Hell, your team's prototype artificial gravity generator is the reason the Krenim are on the warpath. What can we do? How do we stop them? Charles took a deep breath. This was the moment he had both dreaded and anticipated. We beat them at their own game, Admiral. We don't have much time, but if I can assemble the right team, the best minds humanity has to offer, I believe we can leap ahead of the Krenim and master gravity ourselves, turn our rudimentary prototype into a system that will revolutionize not just propulsion and energy production, but the very nature of space warfare. The room fell silent as the sheer audacity of Charles's words sank in. Develop technology in mere days that the Krenim had spent decades perfecting? It seemed impossible. But the looks in the leader's eyes said it all. Impossible or not, it was humanity's only hope. As Charles rushed to his secret research facility, he knew the survival of the human race rested on his team's shoulders. And with the ruthless Krenim General Odin racing to crush humanity's resistance and seize the gravity breakthrough for himself, Charles realized they weren't just in a battle against time. They were in a war for the future itself, a war they had to win at any cost. In the secret research facility, Charles Hill and his team of scientists worked around the clock, fueled by a potent mix of desperation and perseverance. They pored over schematics, ran countless simulations, and tinkered with prototypes late into the night. Failures piled up, each one a painful reminder of the stakes at hand. But Charles refused to give up, pushing his team to their limits. Finally, after a grueling week of trial and error, they had a breakthrough. The small-scale gravity generator hummed to life, its glowing core pulsing with energy. Charles watched in awe as it effortlessly lifted a heavy metal sphere, defying the laws of physics. "We did it," he whispered, a smile spreading across his exhausted face. But there was no time to celebrate. Just as the team savored their victory, an urgent message came through from Earth's leaders. The Krenim fleet, led by the ruthless General Odin, had arrived at the edge of human space. Odin's face filled the screen, his eyes cold and calculating. "People of Earth," he began, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your primitive species has dared to meddle with forces beyond your comprehension. Surrender now and hand over Charles Hill, or face the consequences." Earth's leaders stood firm, their voices unwavering as they declared their refusal to bow to Krenim demands. They would fight for their freedom at any expense. Odin's response was swift and brutal. He ordered his ships to attack the nearest human colony, a peaceful outpost on the fringes of explored space. The Krenim's gravity weapons tore through the colony's defenses smoothly, crushing buildings and shattering ships. Distress calls flooded in, filled with the screams of the dying and the desperate pleas of survivors. Charles watched the devastation unfold, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. He knew that every minute counted, that the survival of humanity rested on his team's ability to turn their small-scale success into a game-changing weapon. They worked frantically, scaling up the gravity generator technology to outfit a small fleet of human warships. It was a monumental task, fraught with setbacks and challenges, but they persevered. When the last ship was equipped, Charles stepped back, his eyes glinting with a newfound commitment. Earth's leaders sent a message to General Odin, their voices permeated with a quiet confidence. They revealed that humanity had unlocked the secrets of gravity manipulation and warned him to withdraw his forces or face the consequences. Odin scoffed at their claims, dismissing it as a desperate bluff. But Charles and his team were ready to prove him wrong. They set out with a small group of human ships, carefully chosen for their skill and bravery. They lay in wait, hidden among the stars, until a Cranium battle group came into range. The attack was sudden and fierce, catching the Krenim off guard. The human ships, outfitted with the gravity generators, danced around the enemy vessels, outmaneuvering them at every turn. They unleashed their new weapons, crushing Krenim hulls and shields with the very force of gravity itself. The technologically superior Krenim ships, once thought invincible, crumpled under the onslaught. Several were destroyed outright, while others limped away, fleeing in disarray. The human fleet emerged victorious, their ships battered but unbowed. News of the stunning upset spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Races that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and insignificant now looked upon them with a mix of awe and fear. The balance of power had shifted, and the Krenim knew it. General Odin, his pride stung by the defeat, became even more obsessed with capturing Charles Hill and seizing the secrets of humanity's gravity technology. He vowed to crush the human resistance and claim their knowledge for the Krenim Empire, despite the toll. Back on Earth, Charles was greeted as a hero, his name spoken with reverence and gratitude. But even as he basked in the adulation of his fellow humans, he knew that this was only the beginning. The Krenim threat still loomed large, and the war for survival had just begun. As he looked out over the cheering crowds, Charles made a silent promise to himself and to all of humanity. He would not rest until the Krenim were defeated, until Earth and its colonies were safe from the tyranny of gravity weapons. No matter the sacrifices, no matter the challenges, he would fight on, for the future of his species and the freedom of the galaxy. Charles paced in his office, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. The alien visitor stood silently, awaiting his response. With a deep breath, Charles turned to face the enigmatic being. "We accept your offer," he said firmly. "The survival of humanity is at stake. We need every advantage we can get." The alien's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "A wise choice, Dr. Hill. Your species shows great potential." Within hours, a sleek alien craft landed at the research facility. Teams of scientists and engineers swarmed around it, unloading crates filled with advanced technology. Charles watched in awe as devices beyond human comprehension were carefully cataloged and transported to secure labs. In a sealed room, Charles shared the fundamental equations of gravity manipulation with the alien visitor. He spoke for hours, explaining the intricacies of their breakthrough. The alien listened intently, occasionally asking probing questions that pushed Charles to the limits of his understanding. Days blurred into weeks as Charles and his team worked around the clock to integrate the alien tech with their gravity systems. The research facility buzzed with activity, filled with the sounds of welding, computer simulations, and heated scientific debates. Dr. Emily Chen, Charles' chief engineer, burst into his office one morning, her eyes wide with excitement. "Charles, you need to see this." They rushed to the hangar bay where a prototype ship sat. Its sleek hull gleamed under the harsh lights. Emily tapped a series of commands into her tablet, and the ship hummed to life. A shimmering energy field enveloped the vessel, while gravity generators pulsed with power. "We've done it," Charles whispered. "A perfect fusion of our gravity tech and their defenses." Meanwhile, aboard the Krenim flagship, General Odin glared at the holographic display of Earth. His fist slammed against the console, startling nearby officers. "Another failure," he roared. "How hard can it be to replicate their primitive technology?" A nervous scientist approached. "General, we've made some progress, but without the core equations." Odin's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll take them by force. Contact our new friends. It's time to crush these humans once and for all." Across the galaxy, ships of various alien designs converged. The Krenim fleet swelled with the addition of their new allies, forming an armada of unprecedented size. Back on Earth, Charles stood on the bridge of humanity's new flagship, the Defiance. Screens flickered to life, showing the incoming enemy fleet. "All ships prepare for battle," Charles commanded. "Remember your training. We have the element of surprise on our side." The human fleet surged forward to meet the invaders. As the two forces clashed, Charles' voice rang out over the comms. "Gravity generators online. Execute Maneuver Alpha." The Defiance suddenly dropped, seeming to fall out of space itself. Krenim weapons fire passed harmlessly overhead. In an instant, the human ship reappeared behind the enemy line, unleashing a barrage of alien energy weapons. Across the battlefield, human ships danced through space, manipulating gravity to perform impossible feats of agility. Krenim vessels found themselves crushed by localized gravity wells, or flung helplessly into the paths of their allies. On the Krenim flagship, General Odin watched in horror as his fleet was decimated. "Impossible," he muttered. "How could they have advanced so quickly?" The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. When the last enemy ship fled or surrendered, Charles allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. Humanity had survived. In the days that followed, news of the victory spread rapidly. Alien diplomats arrived on Earth in droves, some offering congratulations, others seeking alliances. Charles found himself thrust into the spotlight, hailed as the savior of humanity. As he stood before a cheering crowd, Charles couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and unease. They had won this battle, but he knew the war was just getting started. The Krenim would be back, and next time, they'd be prepared for humanity's new capabilities. Charles gripped the podium, his voice ringing out over the assembled masses. "Today, we celebrate a great victory, but our work is not done. We must continue to push the boundaries of science, to explore the untapped potential of gravity itself. For in our quest for knowledge lies the key to our survival." The crowd roared its approval, but Charles' mind was already racing with new ideas, new experiments. The true test of humanity's commitment was yet to come. Charles Hill stood before the massive gravity generator, its sleek, cylindrical form towering above him. The secret facility hummed with energy as technicians scurried about, making final adjustments. Charles took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. This demonstration would change everything. "We're live in 30 seconds, Dr. Hill," a voice crackled through his earpiece. Charles nodded, straightening his lab coat. He faced the array of cameras, their unblinking lenses trained on him. A red light blinked on, and Charles began speaking. "Greetings, citizens of the galaxy. I'm Dr. Charles Hill, and today I'll show you how humanity has unlocked the secrets of gravity itself." He launched into a detailed explanation, his words painting a picture of complex equations and breakthrough discoveries. As he spoke, holographic displays flickered to life around him, showcasing intricate diagrams and 3D models. "But words alone aren't enough," Charles said, his eyes gleaming. "Let me show you what we can do." With a gesture, he activated the gravity generator. The air seemed to thicken as invisible forces came into play. A massive steel container, easily weighing several tons, began to rise from the ground. It floated effortlessly, spinning slowly in midair. Charles walked around the floating object, his steps measured and calm. "As you can see, we can manipulate gravitational fields on a massive scale. But that's just the beginning." He tapped a control panel, and the steel container began to dance. It moved through complex patterns, defying the laws of physics as it twisted and turned in impossible ways. "Now let's move on to propulsion," Charles announced. The cameras panned to a sleek spacecraft sitting on a launch pad. Charles activated the gravity drive, and the ship lifted off without a sound. It accelerated rapidly, streaking across the sky faster than any vessel had ever moved before. On the screens, real-time data showed the ship breaking all known speed records while maintaining perfect stability. "And for our final demonstration," Charles said, his voice filled with barely contained excitement, We'll push the boundaries of what's possible even further. He approached a reinforced chamber, its walls gleaming with exotic materials. Inside, a swirling vortex of energy began to form. The camera zoomed in, showing the birth of a microscopic black hole. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is an artificial singularity, Charles explained. A black hole of our own creation. With careful movements, Charles manipulated the controls. The black hole responded to his commands, growing and shrinking, moving within the chamber. The very fabric of space-time warped around it, creating mind-bending visual distortions. This is the power we now wield, Charles said, his voice filled with awe and pride. The ability to bend the fundamental forces of the universe to our will. As the broadcast concluded, Charles could almost feel the shockwaves rippling across the galaxy. In countless alien worlds, viewers stared at their screens in stunned silence. On a Krenim colony world, crowds gathered in the streets. Their voices rose in a cacophony of fear and anger. "How is this possible?" one alien shouted, its tentacles waving in agitation. "They were primitives just cycles ago." "Our leaders told us they were no threat," another added, its scales changing color rapidly. "What else have they been hiding from us?" Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The once mighty Krenim allies found themselves besieged by questions they couldn't answer. In his command center, General Odin paced furiously. His advisors cowered before him, their usual bravado replaced by fear. "It's a trick," Odin snarled, smacking his palm on a console. "Some kind of human deception, it has to be." But even as he spoke, reports flooded in from across Krenim space. Longtime allies were reaching out to human diplomats, seeking new agreements. The balance of power was shifting rapidly. On Earth, the mood was one of cautious celebration. Charles found himself surrounded by cheering colleagues and government officials. But as he shook hands and accepted congratulations, his mind was already racing ahead. They had changed the game, yes, but the Krenim wouldn't take this lying down. The real challenge was just beginning. The aftermath of Charles Hill's gravity manipulation demonstration reverberated across the galaxy. In the grand chambers of the Krenim flagship, General Odin paced, his footsteps echoing ominously. Surrounding him, his advisors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between holographic displays of Earth's technological leap. "We cannot allow these humans to surpass us," Odin growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Convene the council, now." Hours later, in a dimly lit war room, Odin faced his top military and scientific minds. The air crackled with tension as they debated strategy. "An all-out assault would be suicide," argued Admiral Vex, her tentacles twitching nervously. "Their gravity weapons would crush our fleets before we even entered orbit." "Then we must be more subtle," hissed Dr. Zorn, the Krenim's lead scientist. "We strike from within, stealing their secrets before they can use them against us." Odin's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Zorn's plan unfolded, a daring scheme to infiltrate Earth under the guise of diplomacy. As the details emerged, a cold smile spread across Odin's face. "Make it happen," he ordered. On Earth, oblivious to the looming threat, Charles and his team pushed forward. In a vast underground laboratory, they worked tirelessly on their latest breakthrough. "Dr. Hill, look at this," called out Dr. Emily Chen, her eyes wide with excitement. She manipulated a holographic display, showing a simulation of a planet's gravitational field warping and destabilizing. Charles studied the data, his mind racing. Incredible. With this, we could potentially neutralize an entire enemy world without firing a shot. As they refined their designs, a Krenim ship entered Earth's orbit. Its sleek hull gleamed innocently in the sunlight as it docked at the international spaceport. The Krenim operatives moved with practiced ease, their disguises flawless. They spread out across the globe, ingratiating themselves with human officials and scientists alike. In a dingy bar on the outskirts of New Beijing, a Krenim agent named Krell met with Dr. Marcus Wong, a junior researcher on Charles's team. The human's eyes darted nervously as he accepted a data chip filled with untraceable credits. "The access codes," Krell demanded, his voice a low whisper. Wong's hands shook as he passed over a small device. "Here, but if they catch me—" "They won't," Krell assured him, pocketing the prize. "You've done well for the Krenim Empire." As night fell over Earth's major cities, alarms blared. Krenim strike teams hit multiple research facilities simultaneously. They moved with ruthless efficiency, stunning guards and scientists alike. At the primary gravity research center, Charles worked late into the night. The first sign of trouble came when the lights flickered and died. He barely had time to activate his personal gravity shield before the door exploded inward. Krenim soldiers poured into the room, energy weapons blazing. Charles ducked and weaved, using his mastery of gravity to dance between the deadly beams. He watched in horror as his colleagues fell, stunned or worse. "Take everything," shouted the Krenim commander, "and find Hill." Charles gritted his teeth, focusing his power. With a gesture, he created a localized gravity well, pulling weapons from Krenim hands and slamming them into the ceiling. In the confusion, he slipped away, his heart pounding. But even as Charles escaped, other facilities weren't so lucky. Dr. Chen and several other key scientists were dragged onto waiting Krenim shuttles, along with crates of prototypes and data cores. As the Krenim ships streaked away from Earth, alarms echoed across the planet. In the White House Situation Room, the President of the United Earth Government banged his head on the table. "This is an act of war," he declared, his face flushed with anger. "Prepare the fleet. We're going to make these Krenim bastards pay." Across the galaxy on his flagship, General Odin received the first reports of the raid's success. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to his chief scientist. "Begin the reverse engineering immediately," he ordered. "We'll unlock the humans' secrets and crush them with their own technology." But Odin's triumph was short-lived. A transmission from Earth cut through the celebratory atmosphere on the Krenim Bridge. The human president's face filled the main view screen, his expression hard as steel. "General Odin," he said, his voice cold, "you have committed an act of war against humanity. Return our people and our technology immediately, or face the full might of Earth's retaliation." Odin's eyes narrowed. He studied the human leader, weighing his options. After a long moment, he spoke. "Your threats mean nothing," he said dismissively. "The Krenim Empire bows to no one." As the transmission cut off, Odin turned to his officers. "Prepare for war," he commanded. "The humans have made their choice." Back on Earth, Charles stormed into a high-security military facility. His eyes blazed with a fury unlike anything he'd ever felt before. "They took my team," he snarled at the assembled generals. "They stole our work. I want them back, and I want Odin to pay." The lead general nodded grimly. "We're with you, Dr. Hill. What do you need?" Charles's mind raced, considering the experimental weapons they'd been developing. "Give me full access to our orbital platforms," he said, "and every scientist you can spare. We're going to show the Krenim what happens when you push humanity too far." As both sides mobilized for war, the fragile peace that had existed between Earth and the Krenim Empire shattered. Across the galaxy, other races watched in fear and anticipation. The conflict that was about to unfold would reshape the very fabric of galactic society. Charles Hill stood on the bridge of the UES Gravity's Edge, his eyes fixed on the swirling chaos engulfing Krenim Prime. The planet's surface writhed and buckled, entire continents splitting apart as if torn by invisible hands. Massive earthquakes shattered cities, their destruction visible even from orbit. Hurricanes of impossible size raged across the atmosphere, feeding off the destabilized gravitational fields. "My God," Charles whispered, his voice barely audible over the frantic chatter of the bridge crew. "What have we done?" Captain Sarah Chen approached, her face grim. "Dr. Hill, we're detecting massive gravitational fluctuations. The planet's core is becoming unstable." Charles nodded, his mind racing. He turned to the tactical display, watching as the remaining Krenim ships fought desperately against the human fleet. Despite their technological edge, The sheer number of Krenim vessels was overwhelming. "Sir!" a communications officer shouted. "We're picking up a transmission from the Krenim flagship." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing General Odin's face. The Krenim leader's usual composure was gone, replaced by a mix of fury and desperation. "You think you've won, humans?" Odin snarled. "You've merely assured your own destruction. We will not fall alone." The transmission cut off abruptly. Moments later, alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple energy spikes detected," the sensor officer reported. "The Krenim ships are overloading their gravity drives." Charles rushed to the console, his eyes widening as he saw the readings. "They're creating a massive gravitational shockwave. If it hits us—" His words were cut short as the first wave slammed into the human fleet. Ships tumbled end over end, their hulls groaning under the stress. On the gravity's edge, Charles grabbed onto a railing as the deck lurched violently beneath his feet. "Stabilizers at maximum," Captain Chen shouted. "Reroute all power to the gravity shields." Charles watched in horror as several human ships, their defenses overwhelmed, imploded under the intense gravitational forces. The Krenim vessels fared no better, many of them tearing themselves apart as they channeled more power into their desperate attack. Suddenly, a piercing alarm cut through the chaos. Charles spun towards the source, a flashing red warning on one of the weapon control stations. "Containment failure in Gravity Cannon 3, the weapons officer yelled. "It's going critical." Charles lunged for the controls, his fingers flying over the interface as he tried to shut down the malfunctioning weapon. But it was too late. A blinding flash erupted from the side of the ship as the gravity weapon discharged, its uncontrolled energies lashing out in all directions. The beam struck Krenim Prime like a spear, punching through the planet's already weakened defenses. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, with terrifying speed, the planet's surface began to collapse inward. "Full reverse thrust!" Captain Chen ordered. "Get us out of here!" The gravity's edge shuddered as its engines strained against the growing gravitational pull. All around them, ships from both sides scrambled to escape the impending cataclysm. Charles watched, transfixed, as Krenim Prime's destruction accelerated. Massive chunks of the planet's crust tore free, revealing a molten core that pulsed with unnatural energies. The screech of tearing metal filled the bridge as sections of the orbital defense grid plummeted towards the disintegrating world. Through it all, Charles could see Krenim ships still fighting, still trying to evacuate civilians even as their home crumbled beneath them. A lump formed in his throat as he realized the full weight of what they had unleashed. "We need to help them," he said, turning to Captain Chen. "We can't just leave them to die." Chen hesitated, her eyes flicking between Charles and the apocalyptic scene before them. After a long moment, she nodded. "All ships, this is Captain Chen," she broadcast. "Cease fire and begin rescue operations. I repeat, cease fire and render aid to any Krenim vessels in distress." As the human fleet moved to assist their former enemies, Charles couldn't tear his eyes away from the dying world. He had sought to protect Earth, to strike a decisive blow against those who threatened humanity. Instead, he had become the architect of an unprecedented catastrophe. The battle for Krenim Prime was over, but Charles knew with grim certainty that the war, and its horrors, had only just begun. The destruction of Krenim Prime reverberated across the galaxy like a shockwave. On the planet Zarthak, a key Krenim ally, crowds gathered in the streets. Screens displayed the horrifying footage of a world crumbling into nothingness. "They destroyed an entire planet!" a Zarthakian shouted, his four eyes wide with terror. "How can we stand against such power?" Similar scenes played out on countless worlds. Leaders who had once sneered at humanity now watched the broadcasts with cold sweat beading on their alien skin. Aboard his battered flagship, General Odin's face filled screens across what remained of his empire. His usual composure cracked, revealing raw fury beneath. "The humans have revealed themselves as butchers," he snarled. "They slaughtered billions without provocation. We must unite and crush these monsters before they can strike again." But even as Odin's words echoed, encrypted transmissions raced between former allies and Earth. On the UES Gravity's Edge, Charles Hill read the incoming messages with growing disbelief. "Sir," a communications officer reported, "we're receiving requests for talks from the Vorlon Confederacy, the Tal Shiar Republic, and 3 other major Krenim allies." Charles nodded grimly. "Put them through, one at a time." Hours of tense negotiation followed. Charles watched alien diplomats who had once sneered at humanity now practically grovel for assurances of safety. "We propose a full resource-sharing agreement," the Vorlon ambassador said, his tentacles twitching nervously. "Our shipyards, our energy production, all at your disposal, in exchange for protection." Similar offers poured in. Charles coordinated with Earth's leadership, carefully crafting responses to bring these new allies into humanity's orbit without revealing too much. Meanwhile, Odin raged. His remaining ships struck at former allies, but the attacks were pitiful compared to the might the Krenim Empire once wielded. On the planet Novat, panicked civilians fled as a handful of Krenim cruisers bombarded the capital. But the strikes were uncoordinated, more of a temper tantrum than a real military action. Novat's own defense grid drove off the attackers with ease. "Is this all that remains of the great Krenim war machine?" a Novati general sneered. "Perhaps we chose the wrong side after all." Back on Earth, Charles met with military and scientific leaders in a secure bunker. The mood was tense, a mix of elation at their victory and fear of what might come next. "We've got them on the ropes," Admiral Vega said, her weathered face set in hard lines. "But every race out there will be working overtime to match our gravity tech. We need to press our advantage." Charles nodded. "Agreed. I've been in talks with the Arcturians and the Rigelian technocracy. Both are interested in limited tech exchanges." "You want to give away our edge?" a general asked incredulously. "Share just enough to bring them into our camp," Charles explained. "Better to have them with us than against us when the next threat emerges." The strategy paid off. Within days, human scientists and engineers were setting up labs on a dozen alien worlds. Carefully sanitized versions of gravity control theories were shared, along with promises of deeper collaboration. On the desert world of Rigel 7, Charles himself oversaw the establishment of a joint research facility. Rigelian scientists crowded around, peppered him with questions about the basics of gravity manipulation. "This is incredible," one Rigelian said, studying a holographic model. "With this, we could revolutionize our entire infrastructure." Charles smiled tightly, knowing the real breakthroughs remained safely on Earth. Still, even this limited sharing bought humanity powerful new allies. But Odin wasn't finished. Driven to desperation, he gambled everything on one last strike. A stealth team of his most elite commandos slipped past the defenses of Nueva Manila, a human colony working on gravity weapons. In the dead of night, alarms blared through the research complex. Dr. Elena Santos, one of Earth's top physicists, barely had time to activate emergency protocols before Krenim soldiers burst into her lab. A stun blast caught her in the chest, and everything went black. When Elena awoke, she found herself strapped to a chair in the hold of a Krenim ship. Other human scientists were similarly bound nearby. A towering Krenim warrior loomed over her. "You will tell us everything about your gravity weapons," he growled, "or you will wish for death." But even as the Krenim ship raced for safety, Charles Hill was already in pursuit. Aboard a prototype stealth vessel, he led a team of Earth's most elite soldiers. "We've got a lock on their ion trail," the pilot reported. "ETA to intercept, 2 hours. Charles checked his weapon, a prototype gravity pistol. "Those scientists are our best hope for staying ahead in this arms race," he said grimly. "We're getting them back, whatever it takes." As both ships hurtled through the void, the future of galactic power hung in the balance. The upcoming confrontation would determine far more than the fate of a few captured scientists. It would shape the course of interstellar history for generations to come. Charles Hill's fingers flew across the holographic interface, initiating the prototype stealth vessel's gravitic drive. The ship hummed to life, its hull vibrating with barely contained energy. "Strike team, prepare for deployment," he ordered through the comm. "We have one shot at this. Make it count." The elite soldiers, clad in sleek exosuits, checked their weapons one last time. Each carried a modified gravity pistol, capable of manipulating localized fields to devastating effect. As they entered the uninhabited star system, Charles's eyes narrowed. The sensor display lit up with multiple contacts. The Krenim battle group. "There," he pointed. "The stealth ship is docking with that cruiser." Lieutenant Sarah Chen nodded grimly. "We're outnumbered and outgunned, sir. How do we get close?" Charles's lips curled into a tight smile. "We use their own star against them." He input a series of complex calculations, plotting a course that would take them perilously close to the system's sun. The ship's computer chirped a warning. "Gravitational stress approaching critical levels," it announced. "Override safety protocols," Charles commanded. "Initiate slingshot maneuver." The vessel lurched as it accelerated, skimming the roiling surface of the star. Plasma tendrils licked at their shields, masking their approach. "Boarding pods, stand by," Charles ordered. "Prepare gravitic pulse generators." As they emerged from the star's corona, the Krenim ships loomed before them. For a heartbeat, Charles feared they'd been detected. Then, "Now," he shouted. The boarding pods launched, propelled by precisely calibrated gravitational pulses. They streaked across space, punching through the Krenim ship's unprepared shields. Alarms blared as the pods breached the hull. Charles emerged, gravity pistol at the ready. A Krenim soldier rounded the corner, eyes wide with shock. Charles squeezed the trigger, and a localized gravity well slammed the alien against the bulkhead. "Team 1, secure the bridge," he ordered through his helmet comm. "Team 2, with me to the brig." They fought their way through twisting corridors, using their mastery of gravity to devastating effect. Krenim soldiers found themselves suddenly weightless or crushed by intense fields. Charles consulted his gravitic sensors, tracking friendly and enemy positions. "This way," he gestured, leading his team deeper into the ship. They reached the brig, finding it heavily guarded. Charles's blood ran cold as he saw Dr. Elena Santos strapped to an interrogation chair, her face contorted in pain. "You bastards," he snarled, unleashing a gravitational shockwave that sent the Krenim guards flying. As his team secured the room, Charles rushed to Elena's side. "Dr. Santos, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "The equations, I didn't tell them." Charles's eyebrows furrowed. "We're getting you out of here. All of you," he added, nodding to the other captive scientists. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently. "Sir!" Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "The Krenim battle group is moving to intercept." Charles knew their window was closing fast. He triggered a localized gravitational spike overloading the ship's systems. The lights flickered, and the Krenim jailers slumped to the ground, stunned. "Everyone, back to the pods," he ordered, helping Elena to her feet. "Move!" They retreated through the chaos-filled corridors, Charles providing covering fire as Krenim reinforcements swarmed towards them. The rescued scientists stumbled along, still dazed from their ordeal. As they reached the boarding pods, Charles saw Krenim ships closing in through the breach in the hull. He made a split-second decision. "Everyone in, now!" he shouted, charging up his gravity pistol to its maximum setting. As the last of his team boarded, Charles unleashed a massive gravitational shockwave. It rippled outward, momentarily disrupting the pursuing Krenim ship's drive fields. He leapt into the pod as it detached, the hull sealing behind him. Through the viewport, he watched the Krenim vessels struggle to regain control. "Get us out of here!" he ordered the pilot. The pod accelerated away, rejoining the stealth ship as it raced for the system's edge. Charles allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew the war was nowhere near the end. The Krenim would adapt, and Odin's desperation would only grow more dangerous. As they jumped to safety, carrying their rescued comrades and the secrets of humanity's gravitational mastery, Charles began planning their next move. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, and he would not let it fall. Charles Hill stood in the dimly lit war room, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Krenim space. The flickering red dots representing enemy strongholds seemed to mock him, a constant reminder of the price paid for their recent victory. "General Odin's gone dark," Lieutenant Chen reported, her voice tight with tension. "Our deep cover agent hasn't made contact in over a week." Charles's heart made. He's up to something. Increased surveillance on all known Krenim research facilities. Days turned to weeks as Charles pored over intel reports, searching for any clue to Odin's plans. The breakthrough came in the form of a grainy transmission, hastily sent by their agent before going silent. The video showed a Krenim scientist, his alien features contorted with excitement. "We've done it," he exclaimed. "Localized gravitational singularities. With these, we can tear apart space-time itself." Charles's blood ran cold as he watched footage of a test. A small-scale singularity formed, warping and twisting everything around it. The implications were staggering. He immediately convened an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. "Odin's developing weapons that could render our gravitational control useless," Charles explained, his voice grave. "We have to strike now, before it's too late." The human leaders listened in stunned silence as Charles laid out the intelligence. Admiral Vega spoke first, her weathered face pale. "If these weapons work, they could devastate entire star systems." "Worse," Charles added. "Our agent discovered plans to test them on a captured human colony. We can't let that happen." The debate raged for hours. The potential for civilian casualties took a toll on everyone's minds. Finally, Earth's president stood, her expression grim. "We have no choice. Authorize the strike, Mr. Hill. Whatever it takes to neutralize this threat." Charles nodded, the weight of command settling on his shoulders. He strode onto the bridge of the UES Gravity's Edge, now the flagship of a massive Allied fleet. Ships from a dozen alien races filled the view screens, all united against the Krenim threat. As they approached the heavily fortified Krenim outpost, Charles's comm crackled to life. "This is Captain Talara of the Vulcan cruiser Surak," a calm voice intoned. "We stand ready to assist, Admiral Hill." "Glad to have you with us," Charles replied, allowing himself a small smile. The alliance was holding. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple energy spikes detected," a sensor officer shouted. "They're activating some kind of—" The words died as reality itself seemed to twist. Through the view screen, Charles watched in horror as space warped and bulged. Localized singularities erupted around the fleet, their gravitational pull tearing ships apart. "Evasive maneuvers," Charles barked. "All ships activate emergency gravitational shielding." The Gravity's Edge shuddered as it narrowly avoided a singularity. Other vessels weren't so lucky. Charles watched helplessly as an Andorian frigate was stretched and shredded by the gravitational forces. "We need to take out those projectors," Charles shouted over the chaos. He raced to a nearby console, fingers flying as he analyzed the energy patterns. "There's a weakness in their gravitic field. If we can overload it—" Charles worked feverishly, ignoring the battle raging around him. He knew their only hope lay in turning the Krenim's own technology against them. As he input the final calculations, a grim realization settled over him. "This will trigger a chain reaction," he explained to his command staff. "It'll consume the entire outpost, and anyone still on it." The implications hung heavy in the air. Their deep cover agent, any human POWs, all would be lost. Charles closed his eyes, the weight of command never feeling heavier. "Do it," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The Gravity's Edge's main cannon fired, a concentrated burst of gravitational energy striking the outpost's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, reality itself seemed to scream. The singularity projectors overloaded, their containment fields collapsing. An ever-expanding bubble of distorted spacetime erupted from the Krenim facility. Charles watched in awe and horror as the outpost was literally unmade, its very atoms torn apart by the forces unleashed. As the distortion faded, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Charles steeled himself and opened a channel to all remaining Krenim ships. "This is Admiral Charles Hill of the United Earth Fleet," he announced, his voice firm. "You've witnessed the power we now wield. Surrender unconditionally, or face the same fate as your outpost." One by one, Krenim vessels powered down their weapons. The once mighty empire crumbled before humanity's gravitational might. In the days that followed, human-led peacekeeping forces moved swiftly to secure Krenim worlds. Charles himself oversaw the capture of General Odin, the once proud leader now a broken shell of his former self. As Odin was led away in chains, Charles caught a glimpse of his own reflection in a nearby view screen. The face that stared back at him was older, harder, forever changed by the weight of the decisions he'd made. The war was won, but Charles knew the true test was yet to come. As he gazed out at the stars, he wondered what new challenges await humanity in the vast, unknowable expanse of the universe.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.